It all started on a Thursday morning when I went to pick up a few packages from the post office. Nothing unusual, just another quiet day in my neighborhood, but that's when I overheard something that made my stomach twist. "Ma'am, you can't take all the mail for the HOA," the clerk said firmly, and there she was, Karen, standing at the counter with her arms crossed, demanding the impossible. "I am the HOA president," she snapped. "Everything related to our community should go through me." "Hand it over." The poor clerk looked terrified, glancing at the growing line behind her. Karen's voice grew louder, echoing through the small post office. "You people are holding our mail illegally. I'll have your job for this." I knew exactly what she was doing. Karen had been on a power trip ever since she took over the HOA board. She controlled parking, landscaping, even the color of people's doors. But this, taking everyone's mail, was a new level of crazy. I stepped closer, pretending to be just another customer, but listening carefully. The clerk tried to explain again. "Ma'am, the mail is addressed to individual residents. Federal law." "Federal law?" Karen scoffed. "I am the law here. The HOA runs this community, and I have every right to." That's when a calm, authoritative voice cut through her rant. "Is there a problem here?" It was Mr. Davis, the postmaster himself. He wasn't the kind of man who liked confrontation, but the look in his eyes said he'd had enough. Karen turned, her tone immediately changing. "Oh, good, maybe someone in charge can help me. Your employee refuses to release our mail." Mr. Davis didn't even blink. "You're trying to take mail that doesn't belong to you?" Karen laughed nervously. "It does belong to me. I represent the homeowners. This is our community's mail." The postmaster's calm faded. His voice dropped lower, quieter, but sharper. "Ma'am, what you're attempting to do is a federal offense. You can't intercept or possess other people's mail without authorization." The air in the room shifted. Even people in line stopped pretending not to listen. You could hear a pin drop. Karen crossed her arms again. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm warning you," Mr. Davis said. "If you don't step away from this counter right now, I'll have to make a call." Karen rolled her eyes, muttering something under her breath, but she didn't move. She reached over the counter, trying to grab the stack of envelopes. That's when the postmaster's voice snapped like a whip. "Enough, step back now." Her hand froze midair. The tension was unbearable. Everyone was staring. My heart was pounding, and I wasn't even involved. But I knew Karen wouldn't back down that easily. She slowly pulled her hand back, smirking. "You'll regret this. I'll have your job by tomorrow morning." Mr. Davis didn't flinch. "Ma'am, you just tried to seize federal property. I'm done warning you." He picked up the phone, eyes never leaving hers. Karen's confident grin finally slipped. "You wouldn't dare." But he did. And as he started dialing, I realized this wasn't just a post office argument anymore. Karen had crossed a line, and the consequences were about to be much bigger than she ever imagined. The post office had fallen completely silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the quiet murmur of Mr. Davis's voice as he spoke into the phone. Karen stood frozen, her face pale but still trying to keep that smug little smirk. She adjusted her sunglasses like she was untouchable, but her shaking hand gave her away. A few minutes later, the distant sound of sirens broke the silence. Heads turned. Even the clerk behind the counter looked like she couldn't believe what was happening. Karen laughed nervously. "Oh, you actually called them? Over mail? Are you insane?" Mr. Davis hung up the phone calmly. "You brought this on yourself, ma'am. You tried to access and remove mail that doesn't belong to you. That's not just a policy violation, that's federal interference." Karen scoffed. "Federal interference? You think I'm scared of your fancy words? I'm the HOA president. I handle people's dues, complaints, maintenance. If there's something addressed to the HOA, it's my responsibility to take it." The clerk finally spoke up, voice trembling but firm. "You weren't just asking for HOA letters. You demanded everyone's mail from the community. That's not how it works." Karen turned toward her, eyes narrowing. "You better be careful, young lady. I'll make sure you're fired for disrespect." Before she could say another word, the door opened. Two uniformed police officers walked in, one male, one female, both serious, both clearly briefed. The energy in the room shifted instantly. "Afternoon," the male officer said, scanning the room. "We got a call about someone attempting to seize mail not addressed to them." Mr. Davis nodded. "That's correct. This woman here has been demanding possession of community mailboxes and attempted to grab mail belonging to residents." Karen immediately jumped in, her voice dripping with false politeness. "Oh, this is a misunderstanding, officer. I'm with the HOA. I'm supposed to manage this community's affairs. I was only here to collect the association's mail." The female officer tilted her head slightly. "And the mail was addressed to who exactly?" Karen hesitated. "Well, residents, members, community mail." "So," the officer said slowly, "you were trying to take mail not addressed to you personally or to an entity you're legally authorized to represent." Karen's tone hardened again. "You don't understand how HOAs work. We have authority over what happens in our neighborhood." The officer's eyes narrowed. Authority over property maintenance, not federal mail. What you're describing is a felony. The entire post office gasped quietly. Even I felt chills. You could see Karen's confidence crack. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Mr. Davis spoke up again, his tone even. We have security footage and witnesses. She reached over the counter to seize mail that wasn't hers. Karen's fake composure returned for a moment. You're exaggerating. I didn't take anything. That's not the point, the mail officer said. The attempt alone qualifies as mail interference. Do you have any ID, ma'am? Karen fumbled through her purse, muttering curses under her breath. This is ridiculous. I'm not a criminal. I was just trying to make sure our mail wasn't mishandled. The female officer looked at her firmly. You don't get to decide that. You've overstepped your authority. Karen finally slammed her ID on the counter. Here, happy now. The officers exchanged a quick glance, then the male one spoke calmly. We're going to step outside and talk. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Karen looked around, realizing that every person in line, every neighbor she'd once lectured or fined for minor rule violations was watching. Some even had their phones out, recording quietly. Her face turned bright red. You all think this is funny. You'll regret laughing when I file complaints against this entire post office. She stormed toward the door, but the female officer gently stopped her. We'll go together, ma'am. As the door closed behind them, the tension broke. A few people whispered. Someone even chuckled softly. Mr. Davis sighed deeply and leaned on the counter. That woman has been trouble for months, he muttered. Always pushing her power. I looked at him and nodded. Yeah, but I think this time she pushed it too far. Through the window, I could see the officers talking to her outside. She was gesturing wildly, trying to argue her way out of it. But then I saw one of them take out a notepad, and the look on her face changed from angry to desperate. It wasn't over yet, though. Not by a long shot. Because what happened next would turn this simple mail dispute into a full-blown legal nightmare, and it wouldn't just expose Karen's arrogance, but everything she'd been hiding from the community. When Karen walked out of that post office with the police officers, I thought it would end there. A warning, maybe a fine, some public embarrassment, that's all. But I was wrong. That day was only the spark. By the next morning, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. People were texting in our community group chat, posting screenshots, whispering outside their garages. Everyone wanted to know what had really happened at the post office. And then someone, I still don't know who, shared the footage. The post office's security camera had captured everything. Karen shouting, reaching over the counter, the postmaster's warning, the cops arriving. It spread like wildfire through our small HOA community. Even people who once defended her were silent. But Karen wasn't the kind of person to back down. That afternoon, she sent a mass email to everyone in the neighborhood titled, False Accusations and a Clarification. In it, she wrote paragraphs about how the post office staff had mishandled community mail, how she was standing up for residents' rights, and that she'd be consulting legal counsel for defamation. I read it twice. Every line dripped with arrogance. She hadn't learned a thing. Later that evening, I walked down to check my mailbox, and that's when I saw my neighbor, Ellen, standing there with a worried look. She leaned closer and whispered, You heard what they found out, right? I frowned. About the post office. She shook her head. No, about the HOA funds. My heart skipped. What about them? Ellen's voice dropped even lower. After the postmaster reported her, one of the officers started digging. Apparently, they contacted the HOA management company and found something weird, money transfers that didn't add up. I blinked. You mean Karen's been stealing? Ellen hesitated. Not proven yet, but it's looking bad. Thousands missing from the maintenance budget. Payments going to some consulting company that doesn't even exist. That's when it clicked, the mail. Karen had been trying to get hold of HOA correspondence, maybe to hide something or intercept letters that might expose her. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the scene at the post office. The way she'd tried to control the mail, the desperation behind it. It wasn't about power anymore. It was about covering tracks. The next morning, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I went to the town office to request a copy of our HOA's public filings. It took a few hours, but when I finally had the documents in hand, my suspicions grew stronger. There were invoices for legal consultation, mail security, and community outreach. Each one signed by Karen. Each one paid out of community funds. But the companies listed had no online presence, no contact numbers, no trace at all. It was a cover-up. That evening, I shared what I'd found with Ellen and a few other trusted neighbors. We gathered in my garage, the documents spread out on a workbench under a single hanging light. Everyone was silent until Tom, our quietest neighbor, finally said what we were all thinking. She's been embezzling, he whispered. And that's why she wanted that mail. Someone must have mailed something that could expose her. We all looked at each other. The room felt heavy. What do we do? Ellen asked. I took a deep breath. We expose her properly, not gossip, facts. We decided to draft a formal complaint to the HOA's management company and attach all the evidence. But before sending it, we needed to be sure, absolutely sure, that Karen couldn't intercept it again. So the next morning, I drove straight to the post office to Mr. Davis himself. When I told him what we discovered, he leaned back in his chair, eyes wide. "I knew something wasn't right about that woman," he said. "She was too frantic about those envelopes." He agreed to personally handle and track the complaint letter. "Don't worry," he said with a small smile. "This one will reach the right people." As I left the building, I felt both nervous and excited. We were finally fighting back, but what none of us knew then was that Karen was already plotting her counterattack, and she wouldn't go down quietly. That night, strange things started happening in the neighborhood. First, a few of us found violation notices taped to our doors, ridiculous ones. Improper garbage bin placement, unapproved flower color, driveway too short. Karen was lashing out. She was trying to intimidate us before the truth surfaced, but it was too late. The complaint letter was already on its way with her name all over it, and in just a few days, her entire empire of fake authority would begin to crumble. By Monday morning, it felt like the entire neighborhood was under siege. Karen had gone full dictator mode. Every house that had spoken against her suddenly found itself in violation of some obscure HOA rule. My notice said I'd failed to maintain acceptable lawn height, which was funny because I'd just mowed it the day before. Ellen said her house number wasn't clearly visible from the street. Tom got one for leaving his trash bins out for longer than the permitted time, even though pickup had been delayed by the city. It was obvious she was trying to scare us into silence. But instead of backing down, people got angry. The group chat exploded with messages, screenshots of notices, pictures of freshly cut lawns, sarcastic emojis. Karen tried to defend herself, typing long paragraphs about maintaining community standards, but nobody was buying it anymore. Then came her next move, a surprise HOA meeting. A notice appeared in everyone's mailbox. Emergency HOA meeting, attendance mandatory topic. Clarification regarding misunderstandings at the post office and recent online defamation. It was set for Wednesday night in the community hall. Ellen messaged me right away. She's trying to spin the story. I replied, "Then let's make sure the truth is there too." The night of the meeting, the hall was packed. Folding chairs filled every corner. You could feel the tension, people whispering, phones recording quietly. Karen walked in wearing a bright red blazer like she was stepping into a courtroom, not a neighborhood gathering. "Good evening," she started, her voice too sweet. "I know there's been some confusion about recent events. I want to clear the air and protect the reputation of our wonderful community." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She launched into her speech, twisting facts, downplaying what happened at the post office, even blaming me and a few troublemakers spreading misinformation. She said we'd fabricated documents and maliciously targeted her. That's when Ellen whispered, "Are we letting her keep going?" I stood up. My voice shook at first, but I spoke anyway. "Karen, can I ask one question?" She paused mid-sentence. "Of course, if it's respectful." "Why?" I said slowly. "Were you trying to take all the HOA mail from the post office, even envelopes addressed to individual residents?" Her face tightened. Because there were sensitive documents that shouldn't be misplaced." Mr. Davis, the postmaster himself, had come that night, invited quietly by a few of us. He stood up from the back row. His deep voice carried across the room. "Actually, ma'am, those letters were clearly marked with resident names. You tried to take them despite being told it was illegal." The room gasped. Karen froze. Before she could respond, Ellen pulled out her phone and projected an image onto the wall, the official HOA financial report we discovered. "And while we're clarifying things," Ellen said loudly, "can you explain why the HOA paid over $12,000 to a company called Brightway Consulting? Because we checked, it doesn't exist." Karen's mouth opened and closed like she couldn't breathe. That's a clerical mistake," Tom spoke next. "A clerical mistake that went to your personal bank account." The room erupted. People murmured, shouted, a few stood up demanding answers. Karen tried to raise her voice over the noise. "This is a smear campaign. You're all being manipulated by lies." But the crowd wasn't listening anymore. They'd seen enough. Then the cherry on top, Mr. Davis pulled out a small stack of printed forms. "I've already forwarded a report to the postal inspector," he said calmly. "And from what I hear, the city's auditing department is very interested in your financial activity." Karen's confidence shattered completely. Her voice cracked. "You can't do this to me. I built this community." Someone from the back yelled, "No, you bullied this community." The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was sharp, angry, final. Karen stood there trembling, trying to regain control, but it was gone. I leaned toward Ellen and whispered, "She's losing them." Ellen nodded. Yeah, but she's not done yet, look at her eyes. And she was right. Even cornered, Karen's expression hardened. Her pride wouldn't let her walk away quietly. I'll prove every one of you wrong, she said, her voice icy. You'll regret siding against me. She grabbed her folder and stormed out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. Everyone sat in stunned silence for a moment. Then Tom spoke softly, well, that went well. We all laughed nervously, but deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Karen had just been publicly humiliated, and people like her never accept defeat. Sure enough, the very next morning, someone had spray-painted across the community sign at the entrance, LIARS will pay. And that's when things turned ugly. The graffiti on the community sign was the first sign that Karen wasn't done. The red paint dripped like blood under the morning sun, spelling out her message. LIARS will pay. Everyone saw it. Parents taking their kids to school slowed down their cars. Joggers stopped mid-stride. Someone snapped photos and sent them to the HOA group chat. Within minutes, the thread blew up again. Who did this? This is going too far. Pretty sure we all know who. Karen didn't respond, not a word, but her silence said enough. That afternoon, Ellen came to my house, her face pale. You need to see this, she said, handing me her phone. It was a screenshot from the HOA portal. Somehow, overnight, Karen had reinstated herself as acting interim HOA chairperson. She de-removed the rest of the board members, including Ellen, and locked residents out of the system. She's hacking her way back in, Ellen muttered. I clenched my jaw. We'll contact the management company again. They already started the audit. She can't override that. But Karen was faster. The next day, I woke up to an envelope taped to my front door, no postage, just my name scribbled in thick black ink. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You should have stayed out of this. You think you're a hero, but you're not. You'll regret making me your enemy. No signature, but I didn't need one. That night, my security camera picked up movement at 1:43 a.m., someone walking up my driveway wearing a hoodie, shining a flashlight toward my car. When the motion light came on, they bolted. I checked the footage, short, grainy, but the shape, the posture, I could swear it was Karen. I sent it to Ellen and Tom the next morning. She's losing it, Tom texted back. We need to tell the police. We did. Officer Daniels, the same one who'd responded at the post office, came by that evening. He reviewed the footage, made a note of the letter, and sighed. She's on our radar now, he said, but keep your cameras running. If she escalates, we'll act. Escalate she did. 2 nights later, Ellen's garden lights were smashed. Tom's mailbox was torn off its post and thrown into his yard. A few neighbors woke up to find their car tires deflated. It wasn't random vandalism, it was targeted. Only the people who'd spoken up at the meeting. That's when I realized something. This wasn't just anger. This was revenge with intent. I gathered everyone in my garage again, 10 of us this time. Faces were tired, scared, but united. We can't let her bully the whole neighborhood, I said. The audit's almost done. If we can hold out just a little longer, she'll be done for good. Ellen nodded. The management company told me yesterday they've found thousands missing, all signed off by her. They're just waiting on verification from the city's financial department. Then let's make sure they get it, I said, but as we were wrapping up, my phone buzzed, a blocked number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. A cold, shaky voice came through. You really think they'll believe you? I froze. Karen, you're making a mistake, she hissed. I built that HOA from nothing. You think some nosy neighbor can take me down? You stole from everyone here, I said, my voice low. It's over, Karen. She laughed, a dry, bitter laugh that sent chills down my spine. Over? Oh no, you don't understand. I am this neighborhood, and I'm not going anywhere. Then the line went dead. Ellen looked at me, alarmed. Was that her? I nodded. Yeah, she's losing control. But the truth was, I wasn't sure if she was just angry or dangerous. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying her words, her voice, that hateful certainty. Around 3 a.m., I heard a sound outside, something metallic scraping near my fence. My heart raced. I grabbed my flashlight and phone, creeping toward the window. Someone was standing there near my gate. I turned on the light, and for a split second, the beam hit a face, pale, furious, eyes wide. It was Karen. She froze, then turned and ran down the street, disappearing into the darkness. I called 911 immediately. By the time the police arrived, she was gone. But they took the footage again, this time much clearer. Officer Daniels frowned as he watched the video. She's gone from harassment to trespassing. That's enough for a restraining order. I finally exhaled, shaking. Do it, please, he nodded. We'll handle it, but something tells me this isn't just about anger anymore. She's scared, and people like that make mistakes. And he was right, because just a week later, that mistake would expose everything. Karen's lies, her fake consulting business, even the reason she'd wanted the mail so badly, all of it was about to unravel in front of the entire community. The restraining order against Karen was officially approved 3 days later. The police had seen enough, the threats, the late-night trespassing, the vandalism. Still, no one in the neighborhood felt safe. She might have been legally barred from coming near our homes, but that didn't mean she'd stop scheming. By now, the HOA management company had launched a full audit, and we knew it was only a matter of time before they found something big. The waiting, though, that was torture. Every day felt like standing on the edge of a storm. Then one Friday morning it happened. Ellen called me, voice shaking. "They found it." I sat up instantly. "Found what?" "The money, the proof, it's all there." I drove to her house so fast I barely remembered the trip. When I arrived, Ellen and Tom were sitting at her kitchen table with stacks of papers spread out. On top was a letter from the HOA management company and a report stamped with the city's seal. They'd traced the consulting payments Karen had approved directly to a private account under her maiden name. Over $48,000 missing in 2 years. She'd funneled HOA dues into fake contracts, even filing phony maintenance claims for repairs that never happened. "She's been robbing us blind," Tom muttered, his voice tight with disbelief. I stared at the documents, feeling equal parts anger and relief. "And now she's caught," Ellen nodded. "They've already notified the authorities. There's going to be a criminal investigation." But Karen didn't wait for the police to find her. That afternoon, she made her own move, one last desperate attempt to rewrite the story. A mass email went out to every resident. "Don't believe the lies. I've been framed by vindictive neighbors and corrupt management. The real criminals are those who plotted against me." Attached were blurry screenshots of spreadsheets, half-redacted documents, and rambling paragraphs trying to paint herself as a victim. It was pathetic but dangerous. A few people, mostly newer residents who didn't know the full story, started asking questions. "She's trying to confuse everyone," Ellen said, slamming her phone down. "Typical Karen move." But before we could even respond, something unbelievable happened. That same evening, the police cars showed up, not in front of her house, but at the HOA office. They had a warrant to seize files, computers, everything. Apparently, when the Postmaster had filed his federal report weeks ago, it triggered an investigation that went far beyond our neighborhood. The postal inspectors had found evidence that Karen had been using the HOA's mailing address for fraudulent filings, opening credit accounts, fake tax deductions, even mail forwarding orders under the association's name. It was bigger than any of us imagined. I went down to the office with Ellen and Tom, standing across the street as officers carried out boxes of evidence. Karen showed up midway through, her face pale, eyes wide, phone pressed to her ear as she shouted something no one could hear. One of the officers stepped forward, speaking calmly but firmly. "Ma'am, you need to stay back." Karen pointed at them furiously. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president. You're making a huge mistake." The officer's tone didn't waver. "You're not on file as the president anymore, ma'am. Step aside." She didn't. Instead, she lunged toward the building door, shouting something about her property. And that's when the officer finally stepped in front of her, hand resting on his belt. The crowd of neighbors that had gathered went silent. Someone filmed quietly from across the street. Karen's defiance melted into panic. "You don't understand. I was just trying to protect the community. I didn't steal anything," the officer interrupted her gently. "Then you'll have the chance to explain that downtown. Please turn around." And just like that, the cuffs clicked. The sound echoed, cold, sharp, final. The woman who had once terrorized every homeowner with fines and threats now stood trembling as they read her rights. Ellen squeezed my arm. "It's really happening," she whispered. I nodded, barely breathing. "Yeah, justice." As they led Karen to the squad car, she looked around, desperate for sympathy, but there was none. People watched from sidewalks and porches, some filming, others just shaking their heads. Her empire of control had collapsed, and she was completely alone. Mr. Davis, the postmaster, arrived a few minutes later, speaking quietly with one of the officers. He caught my eye and gave a small nod, the kind that said, "It's done." But just as relief started to settle in, he said something that made my stomach tighten again. "They found something else," he murmured. "In her mailbox, unopened letters, all addressed to residents. Looks like she'd been taking them for months." My pulse quickened. "What kind of letters?" "Not sure yet," he said. "But one of them was addressed to you." He handed it to me carefully, still sealed, slightly torn at the edge. I stared at my own name written across the envelope, the ink faded and smudged. What could Karen have possibly wanted to hide from me? The envelope felt heavier than paper should. My name was written in neat cursive, not Karen's handwriting, which I'd recognize anywhere, but it was still clearly something she'd intercepted. The seal had been slit and then resealed with tape, like someone had opened it, read it, and then tried to cover their tracks. I looked at Mr. Davis, the postmaster. "You're sure this was in her mailbox?" He nodded grimly. "It was mixed with about 50 others, some from banks, some from lawyers, some from residents. She'd been collecting them, sorting through them like they were her own." Ellen leaned closer. "Open it. We need to see what she was hiding." My hands were shaking as I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a notice from a law firm. It read, "Notice of intent to audit pursuant to irregularities in financial management records under the Homeowners Association of Maple Ridge." The date? 3 months ago. Karen had been intercepting legal mail meant for me because I was one of the residents who had signed the petition that triggered the HOA's review. She must have realized that if I found out about the audit earlier, I could have gone public before she had time to cover her tracks. She was stalling, I said slowly, feeling the anger rise in my throat. She knew they were investigating her and she was buying herself time by stealing the mail. Ellen's eyes widened. "That's a federal crime on top of everything else," Mr. Davis nodded. "That's why the postal inspectors are involved now. She's going to be facing more than just HOA fraud." But it didn't stop there. When the investigators continued going through the recovered mail, they found letters addressed to other residents. Two, some containing refund checks from the HOA's insurance policy, others containing complaints or resignation letters from board members who'd quit months earlier. Karen had hidden every piece that could expose her. It was like she'd built a wall of silence out of other people's mail. Later that evening, I sat at my kitchen table, reading the letter again, over and over. How far had she planned to go? If the postmaster hadn't snapped that day and called the authorities, would we have ever known the truth? My phone buzzed, a message from Tom. "Turn on Channel 5, you need to see this." I grabbed the remote and flipped on the TV. The local news was covering it. A headline splashed across the screen. "Former HOA president arrested for mail fraud and embezzlement." There she was, Karen, being escorted out of the county station, face hidden behind sunglasses, lips pressed tight. The reporter spoke with practiced calm, but her words were cutting. "Sources confirm that the suspect, a local homeowners association president, is under investigation for misusing community funds and interfering with federal mail." Ellen texted seconds later. "She's trending on Facebook. Someone uploaded the arrest video." Part of me felt bad, just a tiny flicker of pity. Karen had always wanted control, admiration, respect. And now she had it for all the wrong reasons. But the story wasn't over yet. A week later, a plain white envelope arrived in my own mailbox, this time legally delivered. The return address read, Maple Ridge Legal Office. Inside was a court summons, not against me, but an invitation to appear as a witness in Karen's hearing. They were building the case around her misuse of HOA funds and her interference with government mail. Ellen called right after I read it. "Looks like we'll finally get to tell the whole story," she said. I nodded. "And make sure she never does this to anyone again." But as I hung up the phone, something didn't sit right. I walked back to my table and looked at the pile of confiscated letters Mr. Davis had given me copies of. There was one I hadn't opened yet, smaller, handwritten, no return address. The writing looked rushed. I carefully tore it open. Inside was a short note, just one sentence, written in Karen's familiar looping cursive. "You think you've won, but you don't know everything." My blood ran cold. What did that mean? Had she hidden more, or was this just another one of her manipulations, a final attempt to plant fear before she went down? Either way, it worked. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house made me wonder if she still had allies in the neighborhood. Someone had helped her manage the mail, that much was clear. She couldn't have done it all alone, and then the next morning I got a call that proved it. "Hi, this is Officer Dean from the Postal Inspector's office," the voice said. "We've uncovered something new during our search, a list Karen kept on her laptop. Your name's on it." I swallowed hard. "A list of what?" He paused before answering. "People she called her problems." When Officer Dean told me I was on Karen's problems list, I thought it was just her usual paranoia, people she disliked or wanted to intimidate. But I was wrong, dead wrong. That evening I met with him and Ellen at the police station. He slid a printed sheet across the table, a list of 12 names. Mine was second, Tom's was fourth. Even the postmaster, Mr. Davis, was there. But a few names stood out, people we hadn't thought twice about. One of them was Nancy Peterson, the HOA's treasurer. Ellen frowned. "Nancy, she barely even talked to Karen." Officer Dean leaned back in his chair. "That's what we thought too, but when we examined Karen's emails, it turned out Nancy was forwarding her sensitive documents, invoices, payment logs, even member complaints." I felt my jaw tight. "So Nancy was helping her?" Dean nodded. "Looks that way." In exchange, Karen gave her discounted HOA dues and kickbacks from those fake consulting payments. They'd been splitting the money for years. The room went quiet. It was one thing to know Karen had gone rogue, but to realize someone else, someone who smiled at us in meetings, was part of it. That hit different. Ellen's voice trembled. "So that's how she pulled it off. Nancy was her inside link." Dean tapped the folder again. "Exactly, and it gets worse." Karen's laptop had another folder labeled Backups. Inside, we found scanned letters she'd stolen from residents, including some she never sent. She was tracking everyone who questioned her authority. He showed us one. It was an email draft addressed to the HOA management company accusing me of harassment and property damage. She'd never sent it, but she'd written it, maybe planning to use it later as blackmail. She was building cases against us, I said quietly. Dean nodded. That's why she needed access to the mail. It wasn't just about stealing money. It was about control, knowing who was talking, who was planning to report her. As we left the station, Ellen muttered under her breath, "Unbelievable. She ran this place like a dictatorship." But things moved fast after that. The police visited Nancy the next day. She tried to deny everything, claimed she'd only forwarded routine files. But when they found $12,000 in suspicious deposits in her account, she stopped talking. The following week, the whole neighborhood gathered for an emergency HOA meeting, the first one without Karen or Nancy. The new interim president, a calm, middle-aged man named Paul, stood at the front with a microphone. "I know this has been a long and stressful few months," he began. "But I want you all to know the HOA is under new management, and restitution efforts are already in motion." People clapped, but it wasn't cheerful, more like exhausted relief. Then he added, "And for those affected by Karen's theft, you'll receive refunds once the legal process finalizes." Ellen whispered, "Finally." But then Paul continued, "Before we close, there's one more thing. The post office sent over additional evidence. Apparently, Karen was planning to run for a city council seat next year. Her goal was to get immunity from small-scale civil suits by running as a public official." The room went silent. I couldn't believe it. Karen had planned to use our HOA as a stepping stone into politics, using the community's funds, her fake reputation, and the mail system to craft her image. Tom muttered, "She wanted power. She never cared about the neighborhood, just her name on a sign." Ellen shook her head. "Well, now her name S on the evening news instead." After the meeting, I walked out into the crisp night air. The streetlights flickered softly, and for the first time in months, the neighborhood felt calm again. But that peace didn't last long. As I approached my driveway, I noticed something strange, a small envelope taped to my mailbox. No postage, just handwritten words, "I tried to warn you." My stomach dropped. I looked around, the street was empty. No cars passing, no footsteps. Inside the envelope was a single flash drive. No note, no signature. I ran inside, plugged it into my laptop, and a single video file appeared, timestamped 3 weeks before Karen's arrest. In the shaky footage, Karen sat in her living room, her face lit by the glow of a lamp. She looked furious, muttering under her breath. Then she leaned close to the camera and said something that sent chills through me. "If they think taking me down will stop this, they're wrong. The HOA was never just me." The video ended. And in that one sentence, she'd managed to plant a new kind of fear, one that made me wonder who else was still out there. I stared at the black screen long after the video ended. Karen's words echoed in my head like a bad dream. The HOA was never just me. For weeks, we had believed she was the queen of her own twisted little empire, stealing mail, embezzling funds, bullying neighbors. But that flash drive changed everything. I sent a copy to Officer Dean right away. Within hours, he called me back. "We need you to come down to the station. There's more on that drive than the video." When I arrived, he was waiting with a grim expression and a thick file in front of him. "You were right," he said. "Karen wasn't working alone and not just with Nancy." He turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a folder labeled Consulting Partners. Inside were dozens of invoices, all paid from HOA funds to a maintenance company that didn't exist. The account belonged to Mark Stanton, the HOA's former property manager, the one who had conveniently resigned last year after budget disagreements. "He was the real architect," Dean said. "Karen was just the face. He set up the fake accounts, handled the paperwork, even guided her on how to intercept the mail without triggering federal alerts." I rubbed my temples. "So she was following orders?" "Partly," he said. "She got greedy later, started taking more than her share. That's probably why she panicked and tried to hide everything. But make no mistake, this whole thing started with Mark." It made horrifying sense. Mark had always been charming, the kind of guy who remembered everyone's name, always offered to help out at meetings, and made you believe he cared about the community. He'd even been the one who introduced Karen to the board years ago. And now, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. 2 days later, the police raided Mark's office downtown. Inside, they found encrypted files, burner phones, and a second ledger that tracked every fraudulent dollar that had passed through the HOA. Over $80,000 stolen across multiple neighborhoods he managed. When the news broke, it spread fast. Reporters called it the Maple Ridge HOA scandal, and both Mark and Karen's faces were plastered across every local channel. Karen, already facing trial, finally broke her silence. In a statement through her lawyer, she admitted Mark had manipulated her, convincing her it was all routine accounting and that he'd protect her if things went wrong. But no one believed that. Not after the mail theft, not after the lies. Still, I couldn't shake the image of her final video the way she said they're wrong. It wasn't defiance. It sounded like fear, like she knew something darker was still out there. Months passed. The court proceedings dragged on, but justice moved steadily. Mark was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Karen received 3 with additional charges for tampering with federal mail. Nancy, who took a plea deal, served 1. The HOA finally stabilized under new leadership. The atmosphere changed, no more secret fines, no more whispers or late-night drama, just neighbors being neighbors again. And yet, I never forgot the flash drive. One evening, I got a call from Officer Dean. His tone was lighter this time. "Thought you'd want to know the case is officially closed. Everything's wrapped." I smiled faintly. "So it's finally over," he chuckled. "For the most part, though. Funny thing, when we ran the logs from Karen's old email server, we found she'd been CCing someone outside the HOA, a law office in Toronto." I froze. "Toronto?" "Yeah, but it's unrelated. We think it was some offshore advice for the shell accounts. Still, we're flagging it with the Financial Crimes Unit." Oz then added, "You did good, you know. If you hadn't pushed, none of this would have come to light." After we hung up, I went outside and stood on my porch. The neighborhood was quiet again, the way it used to be before all this madness. Porch lights glowed softly, sprinklers hissed in the distance, and somewhere a dog barked lazily. For the first time in a year, I felt peace. But as I turned to go inside, something caught my eye, a small, cream-colored envelope on my doormat. No return address. Just 2 words written in delicate handwriting. "Keep watching." I looked around. The street was empty, calm, too calm. I tore the envelope open. Inside was a single slip of paper with a printed line, an address I didn't recognize. At the bottom, in faint pencil, was one more note. Mark wasn't the only one. I stared at it, heart pounding. Was it another prank, a leftover from Karen's twisted legacy, or was there someone else still pulling strings behind the curtain? I folded the note slowly, exhaled, and whispered to myself, "Whatever it is, not this time." I locked the door, turned off the lights, and smiled faintly because I knew one thing for sure. In Maple Ridge, karma always finds its way home. What do you think? Did Karen deserve her sentence? Or was Mark the true villain all along? Comment below and tell me what you'd do if your HOA ever tried something like this.